Hey guys, PJ here from, oh wait. Oh, there it is. Hey guys, PJ here from 3D Printing Canada. Today we're gonna do an upgrade to our Formbot Troodon 400 by 400 by 500. What we're gonna be doing today is taking out the stock V6 style Hotend, which is a clone, and putting in an authentic slice engineering Copperhead Hotend. Stay tuned for that build video. Okay, so the first step in removing the fan shroud from your Troodon, either your 300 by 300 size or your 400 by 400 size, you're gonna need a Phillips head screwdriver. And what I do is I don't actually take the screws out. I just go ahead, get on there's 4 screws now. So I go ahead and loosen that one, loosen the bottom one, and then on the opposite side, you're gonna have the exact same thing. So just follow this procedure, loosen it, and then carefully, so you don't pinch any wires or damage anything, just lightly take off the fan shroud. So now what you're gonna wanna do is you're going to want to take your thumb. Now I use my thumbnail because I got long thumbnails. I need them for the job I do. They come in handy a lot. Now, I like to hold down on the actual connector so it doesn't pop out. Pop out fan 1, pop out fan 2, and now you've got your fan shroud removed and out of the way. So you can go ahead and disassemble the V6 Hotend. What you're gonna wanna do next is this fan right here for the heatsink. Let's just unplug that. So now what you're gonna wanna do is carefully just pop off that fan. You're not gonna be using this fan anymore. All right, so the next step, I've already loosened off the set screws on the heater block ahead of time to save some time here. Now what you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and unscrew the M2 hex wrench bolt that is in the bottom of your hot block, so you can go ahead and take out your heater cartridge. And then there's a 1.5 millimeter set screw on the bottom of the heat block, which I'll show you in a second. You can lift up your printer's gantry. You can do this by hand because it has auto bed compensation, so you won't damage anything by just lifting it up manually. So now what I'd like to do is just go ahead and I'm gonna pull out my thermistor, set it aside, and then what you want to do is just unthread your heater block. Now the reason I leave the nozzle in is so you can get the heat sink to loosen, or sorry, the heat brake to loosen up as well. So once we get that out, there will be a piece of Bowden tube inside here that I have already taken out ahead of time. So you'll go ahead, you're not gonna be using any of this anyways, you'll be using a whole new piece of tubing. So right under here, we have a 1.5 millimeter set screw. You'll go ahead and you'll loosen that up before you take this out to get your thermistor out. Otherwise you won't be able to unthread your heat block. So now that we've got that out, we'll go ahead and take the throat out. I'm gonna take the nozzle out. Now we're gonna wanna go ahead and unplug our motor. Make sure your machine is off. Now this rule applies for any machine out there. If you unplug a stepper motor while it's on, you risk sending current to the board and blowing the driver. So the machine is off. I'll go ahead and unplug my motor. I'm gonna move all my wiring out of the way because this next step, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to unplug this from here just to get it out of the way. Now this, you gotta remember, this is your part cooling. So the purple one is for part cooling for the breakout board. Just keep a note of that or take a picture. Or if you're watching this video, you can just rewind. 2.5 millimeter hex wrench. Now there's 2 bolts here and here. So we have 2 bolts. Now we're gonna undo these so we can get at our old heat sink we're gonna be replacing. Be careful not to lose the plastic spacers. If you do, we will have some in stock. If not, you could print new ones if you have a second printer, but do your best not to lose those because they are very important. Now, once that's unscrewed, I'm gonna go ahead and put those spacers in the back. Dropping wrenches as usual, guys, you know. kind of famous for dropping things on film now. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna leave those screws in so we don't forget where they are. There's your orbiter, direct drive motor, completely off. So our next step with that 2.5 millimeter driver again, this is for your collet. This is what compresses the collet between the plates. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws there. You're gonna wanna go ahead and, I like to loosen all 4 at first, just to kind of get it all evenly loosened off. Then I'm gonna go ahead and just take them completely out. You should be able to just, sorry, not completely out. I take them out enough that you can pull out your, there I go dropping things again, your V6 Hotend heatsink. So we won't be using this anymore. Now, next step is we're gonna take our Copperhead heatsink. We're gonna install our mosquito fan or Copperhead fan. They work for both Hotends, and yes, both mosquito and Copperhead can be installed on this printer. Really easy. I'm gonna go ahead and screw my fan down. Now you will only be using the 2 holes on this fan because on the heatsink there is only 2 threaded spots for bolts. Okay. So the next step that you're gonna do after you have installed your fan, your heatsink fan onto your heatsink, we're going to be just sliding this collet in, and then we're gonna tighten it down. So we have the 4 screws. Now I just snugged these up. So now you wanna tighten up these screws, but at first you just wanna snug them. And then to keep even pressure, go ahead and go around and just go corner to corner, snugging them up the rest of the way. Okay, so the next step is we're going to assemble the Hotend and heat tighten it. Now what I'm about to show you guys, I also highly, highly, highly recommend you do when changing nozzles. Yes, it may take 10 more minutes for you to change a nozzle, but you definitely save yourself from potentially bending a heat break or causing any damage. The first thing I like to do is I like to take my heat break, thread it into the Copperhead. Now, you only want it to go down to where the threads end. Then you're gonna take your nozzle. We're using a plated copper wear resistant nozzle. You're gonna thread it in. So after you've installed your heat break and nozzle, I like to just, now in our case we're using a E3D nozzle, so it's a 7 mil wrench. I like to go ahead and take that adjustable and just pop it on here, give an extra little tighten ahead of time. So now the nozzle and heat break are tightened together, but they're not heat tightened. This goes for any type of all metal Hotend. You will need to heat tighten. I recommend using your printer's maximum temperature to do so. Now, if you didn't want to go through all this step in taking the motor off, but you still wanted the functionality and high temperatures of the Copperhead, you can just go ahead. Slice Engineering makes the V6 style heat break, which will be all metal, to hook into your V6 style heatsink, so you'll be able to go ahead and use that in this printer with this heatsink and this Hotend. But because we want to use Slice Engineering's full potential, we're using their heatsink, which makes for easy nozzle changing, extremely easy. The next step we're going to do is we're going to take our thermistor and our heater cartridge and install them into our heater block. Now, I highly recommend you use thermal paste. In our case, we're gonna use Slice Engineering's boron nitride paste. Now what I like to do is I go ahead and I take my 2 mil driver and I unthread the one side. This is what actually holds your thermistor and heater cartridge in. And what I like to do is like take some of this paste. Do not get this in your mouth. You could wear gloves if you'd like. So I like to put a little bit on the end here. Get it in that hole there. and then a little bit into here. And what I'll do, I'm gonna end up with a little too much here because I squeezed a little extra. But what I like to do is hold my finger on the opposite side. I'll try and get the best angle for the camera here so you guys can see what's going on. And go ahead and put that heater cartridge in. And then that thermistor is gonna go in as well. And we're gonna go ahead and take the screw, reinstall it. Let's go ahead and heat tighten our Hotend assembly. And the reason I like to leave it hanging over the side so it's not touching any of our plastic parts in here, potentially maybe burning your BL Touch or something like that. So what I like to do is go ahead and heat that printer up. I'm gonna do 270 on this printer. So now what we're gonna do is take our 7mm wrench again and our adjustable. And what I like to do, now guys, remember this is hot, don't burn yourself. I like to get that adjustable on the block. Now you're probably gonna make your printer thermal runaway from changing the temperature, but all I'm gonna do now is because, oops, it's a little awkward doing it on camera, but I'm gonna go ahead and heat tighten. If I can get the wrench on there properly. There's that extra paste that has come out. I'm gonna go ahead and heat tighten that down. And it did thermal runaway on me, but now we know that we've got our nozzle and heat brake tightened together with heat, so you won't have to worry about them loosening off or separating. So now what I like to do is I like to take my wrench to hold the nozzle. Is me, of course, I'm doing it while it's hot. Now I don't recommend that you do it while it's hot, but to each their own. So the 2mm driver now, you sneak it just in behind the BL Touch there to get that screw. That's gonna tighten your heat brake to your heatsink. She's secure in there. Now, anytime you wanna change your nozzle, it's that easy. Take your fan shroud off. Yes, it's gonna take you 10 more minutes to do, but you go ahead and you unscrew that screw again, then your heat brake and hot block and nozzle come completely out of the heatsink, giving you the freedom of movement to be able to actually install a new nozzle correctly without potentially damaging the thin part of the heat brake by bending it, by trying to get an adjustable wrench in there and do it that way. So I highly recommend, if you are gonna change your nozzle in the future, the same way we just install it, you undo the one screw and it slides right out. So no threads required, makes life really easy. Now that we've got the Hotend installed, our next step is going to be fitting a piece of Bowden tube into the heatsink. Now it doesn't go down very far, but what we need is the right amount of space in between the heatsink and those two spacers that go here, so the Bowden tube will run, inside here and then travel down to the bottom of the heatsink and make a tight fit. You definitely want a tight fit. You don't want any up and down play in your Bowden tube. So I always cut a little extra and trim as needed. So I went ahead and cut myself a little piece of tubing here. I'm going to install it down to the heat brake. Now, I'm gonna take my motor. Okay, so this is probably the most difficult part. Putting the spacers here back in position. Oh. Not losing them and dropping them like I always do. So this is probably the trickiest part. Now you want to be mindful of your wiring. So I'm going to move any wiring out of the way that shouldn't be in the way. I'm not going to install my motor or anything. Now you got to line it up with the hole. Slide it in. Now what you want to make sure of is that, yeah, see, I've got too much tubing there because I always like to cut a bit extra. So what I'm going to do now, let's go ahead and take that off. This part is where you're gonna probably have to take a screwdriver, push down on the collet, pull your Bowden tube back out. I'll trim a little bit. And when I say a little bit, because I was really close, I'm gonna trim a little bit. Now, if I have to go back in 3 or 4 times, so be it. I want this as accurate as possible. I'm gonna chop a little bit off the end, reinstall the tubing. Make sure you push it all the way down to that heat break. Line up your plastics. This part, this is why I said this part can potentially be the most frustrating. Take your time, take a breather if you have to, because it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. Once you get that lined up, so I got lucky this time. I didn't have to do it 2 or 3 times. So now I will take my 2.5 driver, now that that Bowden tube's installed correctly, and then you just go ahead and rethread down. Now just, again, do it nice and snug at first. We don't want to over tighten anything. Remember, this is a printed part. Now, when I say printed, I believe it's SLS. So it's not the same type of printing you're used to, but we don't want to crack anything. Now that we have the Bowden tube installed, the motor reinstalled, we can go ahead, start plugging everything back in and assemble the shroud. Now do keep in mind, you will need to reset your Z level. I would put it back to 0 and start moving your way down from there. So now that all that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and get your wiring back into place here. So I'm gonna pull my thermistor and heater cartridge wires out. I'm going to reinstall my motor because the machine's off at this point. I'm going to install the fan. Okay. We'll tuck our part cooling fan wire underneath all this. So that's gonna come around to the front here. Plug back into the breakout board. Okay. Okay, then I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall my, just to help keep wiring all nice up here on top, not near the back. I'm gonna reinstall the heater cartridge and thermistor. Now all our wiring is reassembled. Now I'll move to reinstalling the fan shroud. So if you guys remember, there's 4 screws, 2 on either side. We didn't remove those to make it easy to just slip our fan shroud back on. So this is where you need to be really careful. We don't want to be pinching any of these wires, potentially creating a short on anything. You don't want to send voltage back to your board. It is okay if you did blow a fan port, you can reassign them into wet. I highly recommend you take your time and avoid anything like that happening. So carefully get the wiring inside the shroud. Now watch what you're doing when you put it back, because it is easy to pinch them if you're not careful. So I'll make sure here I've pulled that wiring away from the metal shroud, and that I get on the screws correctly. And once you're on there, you take your Phillips head screwdriver again, just snug those back in. So again, this is the 4 screws on either side. Phillips head. Go ahead and tighten those back in. And last but not least, we're going to reinstall our part cooling fans. 1. So we got 1 left, 1 on the right. We're gonna reinstall those. You can go ahead and bunch those up a little bit, zip tie them however you wanna do it to keep them neat and tidy. I'll leave that up to you guys for now. For video's sake purposes, we're just gonna tuck them back and move on with the video. And we're back, guys. After installing the Copperhead and resetting our new Z level, we went ahead and started a print. You definitely have to reset your Z level after changing any nozzles or hot ends. So any hot end changes like that will require some Z level change, or you can just hit the baby step button and adjust from there. With that being said, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this installation of our Copperhead from Slice Engineering and to the Troodon by Formbot. I absolutely love these printers. Here in the shop, they are our workhorses. We have now been printing nylon carbon fiber. We've actually tried some Ultem CF by 3DX Tech. These machines are absolutely wonderful workhorses. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends about us, and any interesting content you might want to see, go ahead and drop a comment, and maybe we'll do that in the future. See you guys in the next video.